Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the People on the Go Lunch and Learn webinar. My name is Melissa, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. Before we start, let's check and make sure that you can see the screen and hear me. If you can please use the questions panel on the right side of your screen to type a brief note indicating that you can hear me and see the screen, that would be great. By the way, this is the same questions panel that we'll use for questions later. And just in case someone's having technical difficulty, the support number to call is right there on the screen, 1-800-263-6317. Thank you so much. Today's webinar is Maximize Professional Potential Now with Peer Coaching, and I have with me Paul Axelrod, our guest speaker, who I'll be introducing in just a moment. A quick background about why we have these sessions, especially for those who are with us for the first time. We have these sessions because our focus at People on the Go is productivity in the workplace, and the topics that you see on the screen are the topics that we cover. We have them available in a variety of formats, including the webinar format, just like today's session. The webinars are offered on a monthly basis, and you can check them out on our website. We also have a membership program that makes these webinars very easy to take advantage of. And you can see the different memberships there. We also have many resources available like the blog, Facebook, LinkedIn groups, and I encourage you to join those and also follow our founder, Pierre Khawand, on Twitter. So now let's dive into today's topic, Maximize Professional Potential Now with Peer Coaching. I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who's going to introduce himself and get going with our presentation today.
Well, thank you very much, Melissa, and thank you to People on the Go for hosting this webinar. And good afternoon, all who are present. I am so glad that you're all here. As Melissa said, my name is Paul Axelrod, and I consider myself to be an agent of professional transformation. I've worked in education and healthcare fields over the past 15 years or so, with the purpose in mind of engaging people in their own development and in their own transformation through the work that they do in a variety of formats, workshops, one-on-one mentoring or coaching, webinars, classes, all sorts of different ways of reaching people and working with them to facilitate their transformation through the work that we are given to do. So again, let me repeat how glad I am that you're all here, and why don't we just to sort of gather around a little bit. If you're sitting, put both feet on the floor, and just kind of get some grounding there, and let's all just sort of breathe deeply in. And exhale, and just kind of become present and focused on what we're here today to do, and to do that together. So just by way of introduction to today's webinar, our objectives today, we're going to be learning about engaging others in their own development through a basic peer coaching program. And the key takeaways when the webinar is over, you'll have a sense of why peer coaching is really needed now more than ever, and how peer coaching differs from behavior-based approaches to professional development, what's unique. We'll have some practical experience with the 4 key elements of peer coaching, and you'll have an opportunity to explore peer coaching and how it might apply to your own work situation. Okay. Consider the following. consider for a moment that the most widespread and pervasive learning in your organization may not be happening in training rooms, conference rooms, boardrooms, but rather in the cafeteria, in hallways, maybe even the cafe across the street. Imagine that these informal networks of learning conversations are as much of a core business process as marketing, distribution, or product development. In fact, consider that thoughtful conversations around questions that matter might be the core process in any company. They may be the source of organizational intelligence that enables the other business processes to create positive results. Conversations is a key business process. Important innovations are going on in your organization right now. They're being created at the grassroots level, on the periphery, at the local level, as people have conversations about their real work. Now, all of us have, I think, experienced a conversation that has had a powerful impact on us, whether it was at work or in our personal lives. A conversation that sparked a new insight or helped us to see a problem in a radically different light. So the question is, what sets apart this type of generative, transformative conversation from the many exchanges that occur on a daily basis? I'll just talk about our workplace and the workplace. What are the qualities that make these kinds of conversations so powerful? And you can see some of the elements that I think are really key to these transformational conversations. They're reciprocal. They're reflective. They're based on awareness. And by that I mean kind of just letting things be. Awareness and acceptance of things. Not approval necessarily, but just kind of being aware of what's going on. They're non-judgmental. They're restorative. And by that what I mean is that the focus of these transformative or transformational conversations is on the relationship and on either building, maintaining, or repairing relationships. So there's this kind of restorative element. They're not focused on blaming, excluding, accusing, but rather on bringing back together and reconnecting. And then maybe the most important element, or certainly one of the most important elements of these transformational conversations, is that they're inquiring. They revolve around really powerful questions, asking questions, inquiring about the world, about others, about the experience of those around us. So, sounds nice. We'd like to have some of these conversations, perhaps. How do we get there? How do we create a culture in our organizations that encourages, nurtures, cultivates transformational conversations? And really what I'm talking about is a fundamental shift in the way that we think about ourselves at work, the way we think about our growth at work, our development. A fundamental shift in ownership. Shift in ownership of development to the individual. Currently, typically development, professional development methods focus on individuals and their behavior. You have to learn certain competencies, effective communication, customer service, accountability, teamwork, right? And then the question is, what's the behavior that those competencies looks like? What can I observe or measure in you that tells me that you're proficient in those behaviors? And you get sent to a training or a workshop, or you read a book, and then you learn what to do. Okay. People tell you what you need to do or to get better at, and then it's as if through that knowledge, you sort of memorize what it is you're supposed to do, and then that kind of translates in some way into your actions, and that suffices for development and growth. But what I'm suggesting is that we need a radical shift in thinking about how we develop and how we acquire new ways of being, new ways of doing our work And it's not just about knowing something or being sent to a workshop. New methods of development for our new world will have to focus on the capacity to learn. Not learning new things, but on our capacity to learn in an environment that's constantly changing. Okay? It's not telling people what to think, but nurturing thoughtfulness. That's the key. I think that's going to be the key capacity that correlates with success in our environment now. And one way that this will appear is through methods that empower workers to choose what to focus on under the guidance of a skilled coach. And this really is a true paradigm shift. A true paradigm shift. In the typical top-down organizations, development is typically done to employees. The problem with this is that these sort of imposed solutions to development problems, it can cause feelings of alienation. Like, I'm being sent to this workshop, I'm being sent to this program, this retreat. I'm not really following my own agenda. This is someone else's agenda. I'm here to learn how to do things, but I'm not really doing it in my own voice. I'm doing it in someone else's voice. Someone else wants me to behave this way. It's being scripted for me. It's very alienating. And not only that, but even when it's accepted, it's like, okay, I can get with the program. But doing things to employees fosters, I think, an unhealthy dependency on formal leadership for personal and professional growth. Dependency. And employees will perceive their development, which is their own, their personal situation, as someone else's responsibility. And sometimes organizations may hire consultants to solve problems for them. So they're not doing things to their employees, but getting someone else to do something for them, solve this problem for us. We'll hire a firm that knows how to solve certain problems to do it for us. And this also fosters an unhealthy dependency on others, and it keeps employees from taking responsibility for solving their own problems. Without direct involvement, purchase solutions may provide only a superficial change that does not solve problems sustainably. So a healthier approach begins with the engagement of as many employees as possible in their own development. The peer coaching program connects individual growth with professional development and organizational needs by involving a kind of inner journey of self-discovery and confidence building with an outer journey of problem solving involving the products or services that your organization provides. So individual fulfillment is connected with successful organizational improvement and effectiveness. It's a real kind of coming together, a merging of the self and the group in a very healthy, positive way. Okay, so peer coaching is one way, one approach, one method, one path to doing this. Let me say a little bit now about what peer coaching is conceptually. It's a simple yet powerful way of encouraging others to own their professional growth in a non-evaluative, reciprocal, trust-based atmosphere. It's an effective way for organizations to integrate authentic conversations into their problem-solving efforts. Now, some of you may be thinking, yeah, well, we have coaching in our organizations. I'm a coach, and I'm a manager. I coach my employees. Why not have managers be coaches? Why peers? Why focus on peers as coaches rather than a supervisor, including that in a manager's or supervisor's responsibilities? Well, I mean, in a way, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, research reveals that in one study, 84% of the managers who were studied agreed or strongly agreed that they love to coach. So the desire is there. And in fact, 88% of those managers also believe that the time they spend coaching their team members pays off by helping them achieve their goals. The problem is that I'm too busy with other tasks. Managers don't have the time to do this. It becomes an added extra to their responsibilities. And that's one problem, time. Another problem is that managers, in addition to everything else, are in the business of evaluating their staff. And a peer coach is not in that situation. A peer coach is a colleague who's simply working with another to observe, provide feedback, and support. Peer coach is not an expert. And that's another thing that holds some managers back from coaching, even though they want to. They feel like, oh, I have to know all the answers, and I need to be the expert. But that's not what peer coaching is about. Peer coaching is not about being an expert. The peer coach does not solve the problems of the learning partner. The specific technique of the peer coach is in asking questions, encouraging the learning partner to come up with his or her own solutions rather than volunteering his or her own. Adopting and accepting a non-judgmental attitude, creating a safe environment for self-reflection, and trying out new actions or approaches. Again, not telling someone what to think, but provoking thoughtfulness. Okay. There are key skills here for peer coaching, conversation skills. The peer coach basically it comes down to listening and questioning skills to help the learning partner achieve his or her goals. The primary purpose of listening and asking questions is to truly understand the learning partner's point of view. So there's 4 elements here of peer coaching conversation skills, and I'm going to go into active listening, paraphrase questions, clarifying questions, and probing questions. So I think we're all probably pretty familiar with active listening. Basically, it's staying focused on the speaker, not interrupting, being patient, just letting the other person speak, and of course paying attention to your nonverbal language. Even though you're not saying anything, you're still expressing yourself through your body language. So it's maintaining an open and non-threatening kind of presentation, the way you're standing, the way you're holding yourself. So active listening. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I really want to focus on the questions. These are really very interesting, inspiring, and worth spending some time on. So paraphrasing questions. One of the key skills of being a peer coach is paraphrasing questions. Being able to ask paraphrasing questions. And basically this is about checking for understanding, and it kind of indicates acceptance of what the other person is saying. Not approval, but just acceptance. And so basically what you do if you're a peer coach and you're listening for the most important or striking thing about what the person said, and then ask them to tell you more about it. So it's, again, it kind of goes back to just being aware of what's going on, not evaluating things as you're listening, but just paying attention, noticing, observing the data that's coming to you from your learning partner. And if something strikes you, for whatever reason, it's just trusting your reaction, saying, I noticed that for some reason. Let me ask about it. And so, I've got some examples here. It could be something like this. You mentioned that it felt different on Tuesday. That's just as an example. You mentioned that it just felt different on Tuesday. Tell me more about that. See, I don't really know why I might be asking that exactly, but it's just an intuition tells me that I want to point it out. I want my learning partner to say more. Or, it sounded like what Sheila said was really important to you. Say more about that. It's really just kind of paraphrasing what someone said and then giving them the opportunity to expand on it. And what happens? What you'll find is that the conversation quickly moves to a deeper level. Okay, so think about a situation you were in at work, let's say in the past week, where you could have used these questions. Okay? So this is an activity that I'm holding out to all of us gathered here today. So think of the situation that you were in at work in the past week, where you could have used these questions, replay it in your mind, replay the situation in your mind, and then ask this question and imagine what response you might have received, what kind of outcomes might have happened as a result. I'm just going to give you just a moment here to do that. I'll stop talking and let you replay a situation in your mind, and then ask these questions and imagine what happens. Okay, great. So the second type of question that the peer coach is skilled at is a clarifying question. And these are about creating a clearer picture or understanding, not just for yourself as a coach, but also for the learning partner, for the other person. This might be, I have some examples here. This might be, well, give me a little background. How did that come about? And what this clarifies, what that question clarifies, is how a person sees the world. What are the assumptions that a person has about why one thing follows from another? What kinds of things cause other things to happen? It's clarifying sort of an overall worldview. Okay? Or maybe you want to clarify someone's meanings. What did you mean when you said, that so-and-so did something incorrectly? What did you mean by that? And that allows the learning partner to clarify his or her meanings and even some values there. You could ask the question, what's behind this? What's behind this? And again, that gets to how does a person see the world? What do they notice? What do they notice in their world? In the stories that they tell, what kinds of things are they describing, and what kinds of things are left out? And that's very revealing, very clarifying in terms of how a person, what their world looks like to them, and how they experience their world. So again, replay an interaction you had with someone at work last week. Use one of these questions or something similar and imagine the outcome. So go ahead and just use one of these questions in an imaginary interaction. Okay. And then thirdly, and these are really, I think these are just the most exciting questions of all, the probing questions. And these are really thought-provoking questions, and they really encourage deeper thinking. Usually open-ended questions. How might your actions have contributed to, for example, the breakdown? Right? And here you're really getting at sort of enabling someone to see themselves in a totally new light. Sort of wake up. The way you've seen yourself before, you were asleep to that. You've got a role in what's going on. You're here. You're doing things. You're having an effect on the world around you. See yourself in this new way. Wake up to who you are in your environment. What do you need to take responsibility for in this situation? Right? That's really saying, it's time to open your eyes to what's going on. And then it could be a question like, sometimes people talk about others who, give them grief, or they're doing something that's negative. Right? Let's say this person never changes or gets it. What do you need to do to move on in life, even if he or she doesn't? And this is about, it's not just waking up to the responsibility, to the role that I have in my world, the impact that I have on it, but it's also about letting go. Letting go of things having to be a certain way. Wake up, let go. Let go to a particular outcome. Some people are just not going to change. What do you need to do to move on? Right? And then other questions in this probing category might be, since we can't change another person, what could change about you that would make things better? Right? Advance. Let's move forward. What do you need to relearn about yourself, about your relationship to the world, the assumptions that you make about it? So let's wake up. You have an impact here. What was your role? It's unlearn. Let go of the assumptions that you had about the way things have to be, and it's about relearn or advance forward. How might you be different? What could change about you that would make things better? Or, and I love this question, if you were still in this situation 3 years from now, what would that be like? What are you willing to do to keep that from happening? So again, imagine the outcome of using these questions in an interaction that you had so recently. And just imagine what happens. Okay, just imagine what's happening. So one of the most difficult changes that peer coaches have to make from their usual way of interacting is learning to ask questions instead of giving advice. It's so easy for us to sort of hear someone kind of share some difficulties or just share their experience, whatever, and then we just sort of automatically start offering solutions. But that's not what a peer coach does. A peer coach creates space for another person to think. And that's hard. So, and that's why I call it the question question. The question question is learning how to ask a true question. So, often people will ask these kinds of questions. Would it help if you keep track of how much time you're spending on that project? Do you think you should talk to your supervisor about that? Okay. It sound like questions, right? Well, they're not really questions. So as an exercise, let's cross out the first several words of each question. Oh, well, look at that. We thought we were asking questions, but it turns out we were making statements. Keep track of how much time you're spending on that project. Right? Just come right out and say something. You should talk to your supervisor. So what we thought were good questions actually turned out to be advice, examples of advice. And so this is what Tony Stoltzfus calls solution-oriented questions. They're advice-giving masquerading as coaching. And really the only question here is, will you do what I'm suggesting? And that's not what peer coaching is about. That's really not what it's about. Okay. So I don't know what you were thinking about when you imagined using these questions. But I was doing it for myself, and I know, and from my observations, I know that one of the most remarkable results of peer coaching conversations is that participants, they're not only able to resolve difficulties or issues in the workplace, but they build social bonds that did not exist before, and they enhance those that did exist. And people really are surprised when they take this peer coaching approach and relieved, joyful about the outcomes. And it's really in contrast to the sort of avoiding issues, avoiding conflict, avoiding problems, or the kind of lecturing, or scolding, or even threatening interventions that are common in many business organizations. So in contrast to that, the systematic use of peer coaching conversations really can leave people feeling connected and part of a workplace community. And maybe you were imagining that happening. I know I was. And these social bonds and these improved relationships that are fostered by peer coaching conversations within an organization, they create an environment that supports sustainable learning. And it's integrated into my sense of who I am and why I'm here, how I see myself in relationship to the world. And it supports productivity. It comes from a very integrated place. And that kind of productivity and that sort of sustainable learning is really what's demanded by our economic regime today. And you can reflect on this quote by John Seeley Brown. Instead of pouring knowledge into people's heads, we need to help them grind a new set of glasses so they can see the world in a new way. And that involves challenging the implicit assumptions that have shaped the way people have historically looked at things. And that's what peer coaching is really all about. Helping people see the world in a different way, and that's the foundation. That's the core business process for solving problems, and for growing and learning through the work that you do. Okay, so sounds good. Let's say you want to cultivate coaching conversations into your organization. I'm going to briefly go over what a peer coaching program might look like. I want to be sure to leave room for questions and answers at the end. The thing is, peer coaching is not learned by sitting in lecture halls or training rooms or reading books or even attending webinars, I dare say. It really can only be learned by doing. It's an organic thing. It's a culture. But having said that, you can kind of get started by introducing peer coaching ideas into an organization through a basic program. And I'm just going to share with you what that might look like. So a basic peer coaching program really has three components. One is selecting participants, it's assessing them, giving them some brief training. The second component is letting people observe each other and giving them time to meet with each other to to have a coaching conversation, to have these transformational conversations. And then the third phase of a structured approach would really be to conclude it, to debrief, to learn from it, what were the challenges, let's evaluate it, let's either do it again or set the future course in some other way. I've used SurveyMonkey to do online anonymous assessments that participants would complete, up to 6 to 8 peers minimum, I guess, minimum of 6 to 8 peers, not up to. I think would be a requirement in the assessments. You would include the participants' managers in the assessments. And then the assessment results, can be used to target behaviors if you want to. You can focus on specific behaviors that you want to change or see changed, but you don't have to. And then at the end of the program, participants, managers, and peers would complete post-participation assessments. And you're just tracking whether or not there's any kind of change in behavior, change in the frequency of behavior, or the effectiveness of it. That's one way to measure the success of a program. In terms of observation sessions, so this is giving participants time to get together after they observe each other. Typically, I would say that you want to ensure that participants are observing each other 3 times a week. And then after that period, they get together and they describe what they saw in each other. They ask the coaching questions. They have a transformational conversation. You can use an observation tool to help a participant track what he or she is observing. There's areas there on the left to identify the behaviors that someone might be looking for. And then it's a simple question. Did the learning partner do what he or she could have done in a particular situation? Yes or no? And you count the amount of times that it happened. And that's something you can reflect back to your learning partner. This is what happened. And then on the other side of the observation tool is the section for comments, qualitative descriptions of what happens, of what's observed. And that can be really useful information as well. And then at the end of each, like I said, at the end of each observation period, the peer coaching peers, they get together and they reflect, they ask questions, they have that conversation. And the emphasis really there is on reflection and inquiry, not judging. Oh, that was good, that was bad. No, that's not what it's about. It's more like, what happened? And then asking those paraphrasing questions, those clarifying questions, those probing questions. One thing that I want to be sure to touch on, which I'm just learning about, and I think it's very intriguing, it's called talk walking. And this can be an optional element in your peer coaching program. And basically this means going outside for a walk while conducting your peer coaching conversation. Getting out of the building. And it combines dialogue about work with physical exercise. And I think it's just terrific for that, since physical exercise is frequently missing from our workday. And not only that, but when you're talking about work and walking at the same time, the physical activity can actually help ideas become more sort of hardwired into your brain and into your self-concept. Something about activity, being active and exercising while you're thinking and talking can really help new learning kind of set in a more permanent way. Plus, getting outside, having a conversation in nature brings exercise and fresh air, which frankly are critical for our performance, our learning, and our well-being. So bringing that all into our everyday work practices. There may be a role for the manager in this. I've got some tips here. Basically, it comes down to this. The manager can help you identify participants. The manager can complete an assessment. The manager should not be coaching. And the content of the coaching conversations should be protected from any kind of performance evaluation process. Right. If you're running a pilot program, sure, loop the manager back in at the end to go over what we learned, what were the challenges and so forth. But really the manager and the managerial function should be separate from the peer coaching experience. And then also you'll probably want to introduce your participants, your peer coaching participants in a program, formal program, to the foundations of peer coaching. And these are the elements that you would include in a 1 hour, maybe 1.5 hour program, a workshop. You can see what those are. So, this is my question to you. Do you think in your organization there's a perception that peer coaching would take time away from the more important work of the organization? Or do you think peer coaching conversations could become a way of life in your organization? Or maybe yes to both. So to help you think through those questions, or that question, I'm going to leave you with a couple of assessments. So this one is an individual peer coaching motivation assessment. How motivated might you be to either champion a peer coaching program or participate in one? Just kind of answer these questions yes or no. I'd like to receive helpful feedback on work performance from my peers. I find that helping others learn is personally rewarding. I enjoy collaborative learning. I find working with others who are different from me to be energizing. I look for opportunities to further my growth. Yes or no? If you're answering yes to most of this, you might well be a candidate to champion a peer coaching program in your organization or to participate in one. And what about your organization? This is an organizational peer coaching readiness assessment. And just, what's your impression? In your organization, do people have a sincere interest in helping others succeed? Yes or no? Go down these questions. Just respond to them. What's your impression? There appears to be mutual interest and compatibility among possible candidates. Can you imagine a group of people who would be interested in helping each other? Could you enthusiastically support the creation of a program? And would you be committed to developing your own coaching skills? So if you're answering yes to most of these, this might be something to think about seriously, to consider carefully for your organization. Okay, I want to thank you again for all being here. I know we're running out of time, and I just want to leave you with this one question. In the agricultural era, schools mirrored a garden. In the industrial era, classes mirrored the factory with an assembly line of learners. But in the digital information era, how will learning look? And I want you to think about peer coaching and transformational conversations as a core business practice and as a key component of the way we learn and grow and maximize our performance through the work that we do today. Thank you very much, and if there's time, I'd be more than happy to take any questions and provide answers. Melissa, back to you.
Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing your thoughts and your insights with us today. That was excellent. I'm going to transition back over to my slides now. Just have a few closing slides, and then we will get into the Q&A portion, if you all don't mind staying over just a little bit. Again, this is Paul's contact information, his LinkedIn, his email, and his telephone number if you'd like to get a hold of him for more information about his work. At this time, you can start submitting your questions if you have them, and we'll get to them in just a moment after these reminders. For those who joined us later in the session, again, please feel free to visit our blog, join our LinkedIn, Facebook groups, and also follow our founder, Pierre Khawand, on Twitter. We have a leadership survey that we are still running. We already had a drawing for these prizes here, and we're offering all of them again. And these are some really amazing prizes with a huge value, as you can see. At the beginning of the presentation, I sent you the link to the survey, and I'm going to send it to you again now in the chat box, so you will have that as well. It takes just a few minutes to fill out the survey, and I encourage you to do that. We also have some specials that we're running. This first class, Move More to Accomplish More, is coming up pretty soon. And that's coming up next week. For all three of these wellness webinars, it's only $19.95. So that's really a huge value for these. Eat Well to Accomplish More is another, as well as stress management. I know that if you're like myself, I can use several of these. So I'm going to send you the special link now as well in that chat box. Oh, by the way, if you're a member of People on the Go, you already have access to those webinars, so you can sign up through our website. And so now we're at the Q&A section. I'm going to field some of these questions to Paul now. Paul, here's a good one. How would you incorporate peer coaching into the performance review process? Should it be part of formal reviews or 360-degree feedback?
Thanks, Melissa. I'm really glad that question came up. There really should be a firewall between the peer coaching conversations, that whole process, and the performance evaluation structure. One of the things that make peer coaching conversations work, makes them successful, is the absence of judgment, the absence of evaluation. I think it's very difficult for a person to feel safe enough to have an open and authentic conversation if they were to feel that something they said might end up in their personnel file. I would suggest not incorporating it at all into the performance evaluation program. Now, talking of 360s, you could use a 360 as part of the assessment process. So I don't see anything wrong with that. The 360 may be an assessment tool that you want to use. But again, I would keep the results of it separate from any formal performance evaluation process.
That's great. Thank you so much. This is a really interesting question, and something that we deal with a lot of people on the go with our digital era of learning and doing work. When that's the focus, how can you really start to foster more of a conversational, interpersonal environment in your organization?
That is such a good question because it zeroes in on one of the critical issues that we face today, which is that technology doesn't just bring us together and connect us, but it also separates us.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get around that? So on one hand, I talk about having conversations either by going for a walk or having a meeting, but really that doesn't have to be the way it looks. You can get on the phone, you can chat with someone, depending on how skilled you are as a coach, you can even text probing questions, right? I mean, it sounds a little silly, but you could do it. The problem is that when we're kind of communicating remotely with each other, there could be all kinds of distractions that prevent us from kind of really attending to the question at hand. So my suggestion would be, if it's at all possible to have these conversations in person, to go for it and do that, maybe through a video link. Okay, but if that's not possible, you can still drop a bomb on somebody with a really great question, either through email or a chat or text or even a phone call. So it can still work as long as both parties really are committed to making it work.
The peer coaching observation session that you mentioned, is that a one-time observation session, or is that something that should continue to happen on an ongoing basis to sort of evaluate the process and how people are growing and learning this method? Of course, with the actual peer meeting sessions, peer-to-peer, a follow-up question to that is, how often do you recommend that these take place?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great question. All right. So yeah, the post-observation meetings, that's part of this kind of structured approach to nurturing transformational conversations through a peer coaching program. So in the program that I described, there are basically, there could be maybe 4 of those post-observation meetings. Let's say that we agree to observe each other 3 times a week. Let's meet. Let's do this for a month. And at the end of each week, we'll meet. That's just the structured approach. Peer coaching conversations are really ought to be organic, and they ought to grow. So what would happen is that as people get used to having that kind of conversation with each other from the post-observation meetings, it becomes more of a natural and normal part of their everyday interactions. And then it's not a question of having a post-observation meeting exactly. It's just a question of having a conversation with somebody. And in your normal sort of routine interactions with people, you're asking the right kinds of questions, and you're kind of eliciting sort of authentic responses from people because you're just used to asking meaningful questions. So I would say that the post-observation meetings are really most applicable to this kind of formal introduction of peer coaching to an organization. But once it takes off, you're not necessarily even looking at that structure anymore.
Okay, great.
I think there was a second part to that question that I missed.
Sure. Oh, sure. What was that, Paul? I'm sorry?
Was there a second part to that question that I missed, Melissa?
I think you sort of answered that in talking about how it happens sort of more on an organic basis, and it's not necessarily scheduled like we're going to meet every Friday at noon and talk about this and that. So yeah, you did address that. We have one more question. This one is my experience is that peer coaching. This also pertains to this last question that we asked. My experience is that peer coaching goes by the boards or by the wayside if there's not the higher level support and a corresponding atmosphere. What if not everyone really wants to participate in each role? How do you foster that?
Yeah, well, that is a great question to end with. So it is absolutely true that a structured approach to peer coaching, an initiative with a formal program, requires the buy-in of senior leadership. That's the way our organizations work. Mm-hmm. Nothing gets done officially without leadership buy-in. And if you don't have support from the top, programs will sort of atrophy and die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's why I try to emphasize that the program, the kind of the introduction of peer coaching through a structured approach, is really only the beginning. What you hope to happen is that people will take an interest. Say, oh wow, so-and-so is in this program and it sounds great. I want to learn more about it. You want it to sort of grow by word of mouth and organically so that it doesn't depend on senior leadership to sustain. You want it to be grassroots and local, where people can be having meaningful conversations with each other outside the structure of a formal program. And that addresses the other question, which is that what if people aren't interested? Well, if you're not interested, you shouldn't be doing it. That's absolutely fine. You want this to be authentic, so that those who are interested and it speaks to them and it resonates with them have an outlet, have a place to go to sort of integrate some meaningful conversation into their lives. They will end up being the ones who have the most to contribute to the organization. And those who don't get it, who don't want to do it, who aren't interested, that's okay. Nobody needs, the participation needs to be voluntary and it needs to come from within. It's not something that you can impose.
Right. Thank you so much, Paul. That's excellent. And everyone, thank you so much for sticking around for the Q&A. Just a quick note, when you exit the webinar today, a feedback form like this will pop up, and we would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to give us your feedback. Again, please feel free if you have any additional questions to contact Paul. We'll be sending you a recording of this webinar as well, so you'll have the information to review at your leisure. Thank you again to Paul and all who are here, and I hope that you'll join us again at a future Lunch and Learn webinar. And now I'm going to sign off. Thanks and have a great day. Bye-bye.